Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Transforming Trauma to Triumph. I am your host, Diana Min, and I have a very special guest with me today, Yossi Ghinsberg. Thank you so much for joining us.
Absolute pleasure. Thank
Yes.
you very much.
Yossi is a guide of consciousness and also a keynote speaker. He is leading a journey called The Adventure, which is the journey through the uncharted world of our consciousness, which is really beautiful and exciting. Yossi, tell us, for our audience who is watching who may not be familiar with your work, a little bit more about who you are and what you do.
Thank you. Well, I started, in a very normal family, as normal as, like, I retract the words normal, because normal it wasn't. My parents were basically Holocaust survivors, Second World War refugees. I was the first generation born in Israel to the generation of basically survivors.
Mm-hmm.
And growing up in a house like that, as though being Israeli, so a new spirit. And in a middle-class family in a small town on the outskirts of Tel Aviv. But there's something different about me from a very young age. I loved stories. I loved to tell stories and to read stories. So I was so immersed in the words of books. And a bit like the never-ending story, I kind of like I permeated through, like the pages and kind of started living the books.
Yeah.
And what brought me to the decision that I'm going to write my own adventure book. I'm going to be the hero of the story, not just reading it. This was like a decision made at a very young age. When I was 18, it was the first time that I left home and met another culture. And I met the Bedouins of the Sinai Desert. And for 3 years, part of my military service, I served in the Sinai. And I got to know this beautiful culture, the nomadic culture, the tent dwellers, and the Bedouins. So instead of going on vacation to see my family up north, I would stay in the desert on my vacation and go into the villages of the Bedouins. I dressed like them. I learned their language and really merged into their culture. And it left a huge impact on my life, to that extent that 40 years later, I am still a tent dweller. I live in a tent. I don't live in a house. So I have a house, but I sleep outside in a tent. And no matter where I live, it can be LA or New York or Tel Aviv or La Paz, Bolivia, I sleep outside. I love the feeling of a tent because it sends, beside the romance of it and the beauty of it, by the way, I'm not camping. I'm glamping. Years before the word glamping was invented, I was already glamping, So it's like, it's really in style,
Yeah.
but it's a piece of fabric after all. And you're with the elements and its beauties. There's beautiful carpets and beautiful bedding. But it's in nature. It's on earth. I don't have a TV. I have a fire pit outside, and I watch the flames. I'm under the stars. I feel the wind. I hear the rain, and I know I'm transient. So that's one of the gifts of that nomadic culture that I still carry. There's many other things, but I'll be succinct. So at the age of 21, I left Israel to conquer the world. Naivete is a tremendous force. Being naive actually is much better than being a professional, because a professional knows the limitation and know what's impossible. But when you're naive and you have no clue, your imagination can fly. It's not restricted. And as we know, Einstein said that whatever you can imagine, you can achieve. Yeah. So when the imagination is free, nothing is impossible. And I had the dream, based on my adventure books reading, that I will find a tribe in the midst of the Amazon, in the uncharted, that no person from the outside met. I'll be the first one to find the tribe, and they'll make me one of them. I'll become a warrior, and I'll become a hunter, and then I'll fall in love with the daughter of the chief. I'll marry her, and I'll become the chief of the tribe in the Amazon. So
Wow.
that's the untainted dream of a youth. Yeah, but there's two types of dreamers. Those who dream to create the world, because the world is not created unless you dream it first. And those who don't dare, so they dream to escape the boredom of their unfulfilled life, and this is called escapism. Okay, so I was that type of dreamer that couldn't sleep because the dream kept me awake. Mm-hmm. And the moment I could, I left Israel, spent a year working to make enough money to go on my big adventure. And then I started scanning the Amazon from Venezuela down through Colombia, Ecuador, Peru, and finally in Bolivia, I met my adventure. That adventure was much bigger than what I bargained for. And together with 3 friends, we went into the uncharted in search of rumors of a tribe that was not discovered before. And I lost the expedition and found myself trapped alone in the Amazon for 3 weeks in the midst of the rainy season without any, I had nothing but the clothes to my body. It was a rafting accident. So when I came out of the river, I had nothing, no gun, no machete, nothing. For 3 weeks, I survived on my own in the Amazon against all odds. In these 3 weeks, I had more than one event that I would consider an event of intervention. What I mean is that there was a greater force. And because of the urgency of the circumstances, the miracle couldn't be hidden. So it was unveiled. So I experienced things that are impossible. That just, and I knew that my life was saved, not only because I found also that I was activated, understanding how powerful I am in such circumstances. But this was part of it. It wasn't enough. There was also another force. So it was a huge revelation. One revelation was that finally I am the hero of my own story. When the circumstances, actually when my dream turned into a nightmare, only then it was realized. Only then I discovered that actually I am the hero. I can deal with life. I'm not a victim, and I'll never ever be a victim. I understood that the victim is a choice. I understand that survival is natural, and actually, there's many learning from this experience. But also I was touched by something, and I was very young. I was 22 years old, and maybe too young to touch something so sacred. And that's actually the trauma that I suffered. Wasn't the trauma from the fear and the isolation or the hunger or the beast. My trauma was existential. I was touched by something, and I wanted to be touched by it again. I, by the way, wrote a book about my experience. The book was translated into 15 languages, was published in 30 countries, became a bestseller in most countries, and was turned into a Hollywood movie, and was turned into a Discovery Channel documentary. So it's the story got a worldwide exposure. The title of the book and the movie is Jungle. The movie is the person, the actors that actually plays my character is Daniel Radcliffe, known also as Harry Potter. Wow. So I was very fortunate to have such an iconic figure portray my character in this movie. So whoever is interested in that story can watch the movie or read the book. But my life was impacted so much by that experience that it became a life of inquiry, search, and I traveled the world ever since. For over 30 years, I traveled the entire planet in search of how can you put a name on it? There's no name for what I searched, but I wanted to touch that. I wanted to feel it again. And I understood later. And I would say, it was kind of almost a certain addiction, So what I mean by that the search led me to places, and I took my search to the mystical aspect, because the mystical aspect is direct experience of the miraculous. So I didn't want to study about it. I didn't want the knowledge about it. I didn't want to read about it. I wanted to feel it again. So I went into all kinds of practices, from Hasidic Kabbalah practices to, Messianic Christian practices, to in Muslim zikrs, which are ecstatic movements that bring you into trance. I went into Hinduism and Buddhism, and everything was the same innocence and naivete. When I went into Buddhism, I was sure I'm going to be enlightened. Everything I do with total immersion, total naivete, and with devotion and passion. And it's a beautiful journey. But now I'm much more chilled. Part of it was shamanism as well, because shamanism allows you to travel into places easier than consciousness. Yeah. But right now, after many years, I call myself post-psychedelic. I passed my shamanic period, and now my adventure is into consciousness. And what I do is this adventure, I use that beautiful expression: if you want to master something, teach it. So what I do, I take other people with me into that inquiry into consciousness. And I've been doing it for 20 years publicly, and mainly actually in corporate environment as a keynote speaker, but more intimately and deeply into spiritual realms, in private sessions with groups of people. And that's what I'm doing now. I call that the adventure because the adventure is my brand. The adventure means it's not an organized tour. You're not sure where you're going to sleep tonight and what you're going to eat and what you're going to see. There's unexpected. There are challenges. There are fears to be met and conquer. And you take a chance. You leave the comfort zone. All this is part of the word adventure. So this is the brand of what I do. My life is an adventure. Life is an adventure. And Ellen Keller, she had a beautiful expression. One of her proverbs is that she coined was, life is a great adventure or nothing. That's what she said. And I believe that. So I gave you a bit of introduction about my life. That life went through 4 continents, 4 wives, It's part of being part. I get married.
Part of the adventure.
And 4 children. And everywhere I go, I learn the language, I learn the culture, I become part of it. I call myself an Earthling. And unfortunately, they don't issue documents for being Earthlings. My documents show different nationalities, but I don't believe in nationality. I believe in culture, but I believe that our identity should be Earthling, because as Earthling, we'll understand that we are part of one planet, we are one family, and we'll stop the divide and the separation and the pillage of these planets that come for lack of consciousness, that this is our home and we are one family living together on this home, and that there is plenty for all of us on this planet. So part of my message is also that message of being responsible, and part of my journey into awareness touches also this basic paradigms of what it means to be a human being. For me, to be a human being has to start with the recognition that we are animals. Yeah, because the idea that human beings are godly creatures, demigods, doesn't serve us, because it brings to our separation from nature, to the thought that we are above it. So being an animal is the base for us being human beings. First learn our natural animal nature that is actually much more in tuned and in harmony with life than the disturbance of our intelligence. We are too intelligent for our own good. Yeah. So this is part of my journey and part of my message. And I tried to give you a succinct intro.
That was beautiful. I loved it. I went on an adventure through that story. I'm like, oh my God. Having spent some time in the Amazon jungle doing shamanic work, I cannot even imagine what 3 weeks alone in the Amazon during rainy season could even be like. So I'm super excited to dive more into that journey in either the book or the movie, because wow.
I want to suggest to you and to all your audiences that anybody that will send me an email, I'll send them a link to watch the movie for free. Okay. So it's an amazing movie, and it's easier to watch a movie than to read the book. For anyone that wants to watch my movie, I give it as a present to your audiences.
Oh, great! Yeah, we'll actually, you know what, we'll attach that link on this page where this interview is being broadcasted, so everybody can have access to that amazing journey that you took. Wow, what a beautiful story. So I love that you are leading people through this adventure, right, of consciousness. And I think right now, with the current climate, people are really faced with a breakdown in either their identity or what they thought was reality, and really having to readjust themselves. Or maybe having a hard time doing that, right? So what is the work with conscious? How can the work that you're offering through this journey of understanding our consciousness really offer some support right now?
It can, absolutely. So, like the word consciousness is a big word. So I'll break it down and just look at certain aspects of the way we perceive and act in the world. And I'll just explain a few things that may benefit anybody that listens, especially in these times. As you say, this time is a time of crisis, but crisis, as you know, maybe in Chinese, where this crisis emerged from China, and in Chinese, the word crisis is depicted by two other words. One is danger, and the other is opportunity. So actually, crisis means there's danger, but also it represents opportunity. I believe that the world is in danger, but actually the danger is not because of the crisis of COVID-19. The real crisis is, like the total destruction of nature, preying on Earth, and the pillage and the climate change and all that. We are in a stage that is called evolutionary suicide. We are actually, as a species, we do something very illogical. We actually destroy our home base and destroy life, not understanding that this is home and that we are connected to all of life. So COVID, for me, is not the crisis. COVID maybe is an awakening, and maybe it's a catalyst. And I think that that's also what represents the opportunity. The opportunity may come with a mayhem. Yeah, the situation may grow actually worse in order to cause a reaction. We need a reaction. So this is, on eye level, but I will take it down to the person, to the normal person, and explain something. The worst things that we can do, and that's how we are so vulnerable, is to worry about it. Okay? And I'll try to touch it and alleviate some of that worry from people. The circumstances of survival is a very unique circumstances. When in survival situation, first of all, we have to actually define What is survival? And I'll define it simply as an immediate danger to life itself. So in a survival situation, actually something is actually risking life now. That's survival. So if I'll give an analogy, let's say you're walking in the woods and a bear suddenly comes from behind the tree. And it's a big bear, and the bear rises with its claws, and now there's danger for life. This is survival.
Right.
In such circumstances, actually, the situation, as dangerous as it is, it promotes peak performance from the person that is at risk. And that's not something that a person has to learn, because every animal, let it be a cockroach in your kitchen that you're trying to get rid of, any animal in a real life endangering situation is the most resourceful, strong, witty, cunning, and powerful, because life is sacred through existence. Any animal at risk will find any way just to stay alive. Okay? So we as well, being an animal, the organism takes over, and we know what to do. And we do in such circumstances is basically, there's 2 or 3 strategies. The first strategy is to fight the bear. Okay? So if I see the bear is too close to me, I cannot run. So I pick up a strong branch from the ground or a rock, and I'm trying to scare the bear, and I'm going to fight the bear. Even though I never fought a bear before, I will have a tremendous power, tremendous wisdom, tremendous move. My body will be agile, my spirit will be brave, and my senses will be all calm to allow me to fully increase my chances of, fighting the bear and scaring him or killing. My second strategy will be, I see a house far down the hill, so I'm running as fast as I can to find a refuge, or I'll climb a tree. So this is the classic. So the classic is fight or flight. Okay? That's what I'll do. But if the bear got to me, and now it's closing on me, the bear, now I cannot fight and I cannot run anymore because the bear got to me, then it means, sadly, I'm going to die.
Yeah.
In that circumstances, there is the third strategy to help me die in a peaceful way. So the body brings me into the third option, which is freeze. So in a freeze, I'm disassociating myself euphorically because my body releases lots of endorphins. So I'm in an euphoric, I don't care about the bear anymore. I'm in total euphoria.
Yeah.
So the horror doesn't bother me, the claws coming and the sharp teeth. I'm not there anymore. I checked out. I'm just, And also it calms the pain. So if the claws enter, I will not feel pain. So the third survival option is to die peacefully. If I cannot fight or fly, I fall into freeze, and then I'm saved the horror, and I'm going to get a peaceful death, which is very wise and gentle of the organism to know this strategy. However, there's a cunning strategy hidden in that freeze, because the moment I fall down and freeze, the bear doesn't see me as a risk or a challenge anymore, and the bear may just leave me there, thinking I'm dead, leave me to be dead, and the bear is going to leave me, and that's another strategy that I may survive despite that. So this is the wisdom of the body. Now, all this I don't have to learn, because I know innately this is the wisdom of millennia. Yeah. So what I'm saying is, survival situation is rare, and also when it comes, we are in peak performance. Everybody wants to be in peak performance. Survival, real survival means peak performance. So if you're in real survival, you don't have to worry. You don't have to learn. You don't need to get ready for it. You are ready. It's rare, but if it happens, you will know what to do and you will be the best that you can be. You will be a superhero in such circumstances. So don't worry about survival. So why we worry? And that's why I told you that long story about the bear. What happens is that we call bear, but there is no bear. Everybody has bears, stress, what will happen, the bank, the corona, losing the job, and having kids and worries that maybe tomorrow there'll be no food. Those are bears, but they're not in the room. There is no bear. But I call bear. So the body, the organism believes there is bear, but there is no bear.
Yeah.
And that is called imaginary survival. Imaginary survival is more dangerous than real survival. Because real survival is rare and we know what to do. We are in peak performance. Imaginary survival is prevalent, is part of our life, and we are not in peak performance. We are performing the worst that we can perform. So this is the difference between survival and imaginary survival. We are not in survival. If we would be in survival, don't worry. You will know what to do and you will do it the best way. Don't worry about it.
Yeah.
So what you have to worry about it is about being worried. Because being worried is calling bear, but there is no bear.
There's no bear.
So that's the first realization, there is no bear. If you're not sure, I'll tell you how to check if there is a bear or not. It's a very simple way to check. You go to the fridge and you open the fridge. If you see some cheese, a couple of tomatoes, some butter, bread, blueberries, I don't know, close the fridge. Then walk to the bedroom. If you see a bed with a blanket and a pillow, there are no bears. You are not in survival. There's food in the fridge and there's a blanket on the bed. You are not in survival. Don't worry. So now this is an explanation. But in order not to worry, you need to know how not to worry. It's not enough to say, don't worry. It's not enough that I tell this story and people say, I actually get it. It's not enough. We are programmed already. We are conditioned to worry. It's an age of stress. It's an age of SSRI. People take antidepressant. This is the product of stress, of anxiety. So what we need is to learn how to relax our nervous system. And there is a technique, or more than one technique, to first of all relax the nervous system. You cannot go a journey into consciousness before you get the tools, first of all, to enter. If you are stressed and suffer from anxiety, and you're scattered, and you're full of fears, you cannot enter that uncharted. You're not equipped properly. So we need to start, first of all, prepare yourself. And this is the first stage. The first stage is learning how not to fall into imaginary survival. I teach that. And using different techniques. The techniques can be physiological technique because the animal knows how to do it. We can learn from animals how to calm our nervous system by movements of our heads, by certain technique of breathing. We can alter our nervous system and move it from a situation of anxiety to a situation of total relaxation without doing any exercises of thinking there's nothing to worry about it. Doing something with the body, not with the mind, calms the nervous system. When your nervous system is calm, it actually radiates calmness all over. When it's in anxiety, it radiates anxiety. Anxiety attracts trouble, And calmness attracts beauty and grace. Actually, by altering your body, you alter your environment. The environment will respond differently to you. So the logic of stressing is like praying for disaster. You actually endorse what you're afraid of. You actually bring it on. So that's the first stage, learning to stay calm, to stay cool, building resilience. Only then we can take a further step into the uncharted and start dealing with other things. So there's an order, like to this journey. Yeah. We begin with these techniques, and then we move further. We move further into consciousness, using different faculties and using techniques that I learned in my journey. As I said, I learned from so many masters, and I met so many gurus, and I went into religions and sects, and I always tried to learn. That's one quality that I have, is that I'm not afraid of learning. In fact, when people ask me, what is your profession? I tell them I am a professional unprofessional. And what I mean by that, that I can be a professional in anything I want. When I was treating opiate addicts for 6 years, I'm not a psychiatrist, I'm not a psychologist, and I'm not a doctor, but I can read. So I learned every article about opiate addiction. And when I would talk to doctors or psychiatrists or clinical psychologists, I knew more than them on the very narrow field of opiate addiction, because I can learn. When I worked in conservation in the Amazon for 3 years, and I built an ecological village deep in the Amazon, I learned the language of ecology. And, I went to conferences, I read articles. Today, that expression, knowledge is power, is expired. It's not true. Because knowledge is Google.
Yeah.
Anybody has knowledge. Mm-hmm. In a split of a second, knowledge is available to all of us. Right. So actually, the power is learning. And today learning has to be also forgetting, because learning is filling the cup. And when you learn too much and you believe actually you're basically full of yourself. So the importance is actually also releasing what you know and allowing new information, because things change so fast these days. And so from everything that I learned, I developed certain techniques that are not mine, but what I've developed is the medley, like a certain way, using different techniques. And when I use a technique, I'm actually I'm applying a Pareto Law on my techniques. Pareto Law? Pareto Law is, Pareto was a mathematician, an Italian mathematician living in the 18th century. But his work was discovered only maybe 20, 30 years ago by an English student that happened upon this book in the library. And he discovered the work of Pareto. Pareto discovered an incredible phenomena that basically can be summarized, that 20% of the effort yields 80% of the result. This is also known as the 20-80 principle. And it goes across every field. It's validated. So I'm applying Pareto Law on all the practices. I look for the short. I call it consciousness hacking, awareness hacking, which means minimal effective dose. So most of my practices are basically 15 minutes in length, no more, but they demand repetition. So my adventure takes 90 days. Yeah. We go into consciousness for 90 days, but we practice 15 minutes a day, that's all. And I can talk much more about it, but I'll allow you to guide me because otherwise I don't.
Well, I've learned a lot. And I hope the audience has learned a lot too. If you are interested in joining Yossi for this adventure into consciousness, I welcome you to click the link that is attached to this email or underneath this interview. Yossi, you are a wealth of knowledge and a gift to those who get to learn from you and to be guided by you. And, I'm excited for, I love the analogy of this imaginary bear. I think that alone has really shattered this illusion that we are in survival because, as you said, if you have food to eat, you have a place to sleep, you are more abundant than you know. And I think it all comes from perspective, right? When we really understand how blessed we are to and how safe we are. And it also comes in from with my understanding of my own spiritual work that we are not here operating alone. There's always a divine force that comes in to protect us, shield us, guide us, carry us through our challenges, through our obstacles. And if you've never had faith, it's in those moments of maybe perceived bears or perceived survival when you really do see, like you said, you're touched by something. And in my experience as well, for me, I've developed faith through all of the ways in which I've been saved, and as I'm sure that you have as well. And to our listeners, if I feel that most times, and I thought about this the other day, I don't think a lot of people do acknowledge God when they are touched by this divine source, right? By this infinite intelligence. They don't acknowledge it as such. They don't recognize it as such. Oh, I'm so lucky. Oh, it just happened. Oh, what a coincidence. Like all of these things. And it's like, no, that is something else that is here. That is always with each of us, making sure that we are abundant and we're going to survive. And we will be okay. And everything is fine. Everything is fine. It might not, and I think, a lot of that, the work with the consciousness will really help too, is because I think a lot of times when people don't feel that they are fine, it's because there's a lot of expectation, right? And there's a lot of, perception of this is the way it should be, and rigidness, and not being open and not being flexible to the way that, or being present with what is, right? And accepting our reality as it shows up. And that is a lot of work within the consciousness to really have that detachment with our reality and our experiences to find that inner peace.
I agree. There's two, like I love, you said many things that I don't know which to relate to first. But absolutely, there's, for me, I don't believe in a superior intelligence because I know. So once you know, you're not a believer. You are nowhere. You know what I mean? So there's no doubt. I have faith, but I don't believe anymore. I know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, once you touch, and that knowledge is very powerful, because if you just hear somebody preaching, you can believe or not. But if you are touched by it, you're not a believer anymore. Now you know, and you can still have faith, but you're not in a place of believing. I rather not believe. I rather have faith, but I always pursue knowledge instead of belief. If I read a book, this is not knowledge, this is belief. I have to believe in what's written in this book. If somebody in the university is teaching me, this is not knowledge. I don't know it. I have to believe in. But if I learn something through my own experience in my own body, now this is knowledge, experience. My own experience is knowledge. So I always pursue my own experience rather than just studying and learning. Studying and learning can be helpful guides, give me the shortcut, show me a way, but they cannot walk it for me. Looking at the map is different than walking the path. And walking the path has to be an individual pursuit. Each one of us has to do that journey. Somebody can show you, but nobody can walk for you. So that's what I do. I'm not a teacher. I'm a guide.
Yeah.
The difference between a teacher and a guide, the teacher tells you, a guide walks with you.
Yes.
So I do the journey by walking it myself. And as to, our relationship with the world, there's two aspects. One aspect is dealing with the reality as it crops up into becoming in the present moment. So yes, gratitude, faith, and acceptance of that moment is absolutely necessary. But also what is necessary is, as you said, a certain maturity that allows us to not react, but actually take responsibility. The difference between reacting and having responsibility is that detachment that you're talking about. Because if you are not detached, you cannot take responsibility. You are only just reacting to circumstances. By reacting to circumstances, you become a victim of circumstances. By being responsible, you prevent being a victim, and no matter what the circumstances, no matter how harsh the circumstances are, being responsible means you're able to respond to them. Able to respond means I'm not a victim. I can do something about it. So that's the difference. Taking that step of detachment, even if it's for a couple of seconds, being able to actually see from a different perspective, and then choose your response, that's one thing. The other thing, once you know how to do that, you can enlarge your realm of responsibility. And that realm of responsibility can be vast. Once you understand you're not a victim, never, because victim is a choice. Adversity is not a choice. But victim is a choice. Adversity is circumstances coming, but being a victim of the circumstances, that's your choice. Always. Yeah. Always. Now, saying always is very radical. It's very extreme, because you can imagine situations that are terrible and you say, oh, this for sure, this person is a victim because, as a child, he experienced something terrible and he was just such an innocent child. Even that person, and we know that this exists, unfortunately, as the choice not to be a victim of the circumstances. Always, no matter what the circumstances, we can rise above victimhood. And if we do, it opens our ability to be responsible for much more. We can actually take responsibility for the entire world. And when I say that, it's not like a nice expression to say. In 2019, the person of the year by Time magazine, do you recall?
No.
Her name is Greta Thunberg.
Oh,
She's 15 years old.
Yes.
And she decided she is responsible for the entire planet.
Mm-hmm.
So if a child in Sweden can decide that they're responsible for the entire planet, become the person of the year, and being nominated for the Nobel Prize consecutively in 2019 and 2020, and she's only 15. So that's what I'm saying. We can choose how responsible we want to be. But that's only half of the conduct that we are offered. There is another half, because that half of being responsible and dealing with whatever circumstances come from resilience is understanding ourselves as being created. So we are created, life appears, and we can choose how to deal with life. And if we are masters, we're never victims, we're always responsible, and we are balanced and strong, and basically that's happiness. But there's one more thing that we can do. We can actually not deal with the reality, but create it And that's the other aspect. We have the power also to be creators, not only created. We were given a power to create worlds, and we are creating them all the time. Actually, we are very good at creating realities. We're so good that actually all of us are great sages, masters. The problem with it is that we're not aware that we are creating realities.
Yeah.
We're just aware. We're creating them without being aware that we are creating our realities.
Right.
And many times we create realities that are not good for us at all. We're not aware that we are actually creating them. So bringing awareness to our ability to be creators, to an unbelievable virtue that only we have. And that actually means we can interfere and with reality, not just accept it, but actually create it. So, those are the levels that we move. And when we start creating reality, being conscious, we become magicians, but we're magicians anyway. We're only creating realities without being aware, and we create something that we don't want. Let's start harnessing that power to our own benefit and to the benefit of everybody else, because it's part of our possibility as human beings.
So, the reason we're here. It's
yeah.
the reason we are all here. To exercise these magical powers that exist, and really, like you said, harnessing it, tapping into it, because we all have that ability. So beautiful. Thank you so much, Yossi. I appreciate the channel of light that you are, and the guide that you are on this earth to the humans that are needing your work, and really, like, and I think I said this on our first initial call, it's just, your energy is very harmonious. And it's very, I can listen to you talk all day, but unfortunately we do have a time limit. So I will be attaching all of Yossi's information, links to his movie, all of his work in this email, as well as on the site that this interview is hosted on, and you guys will be able to get in touch with him and join his programs and dive more into his work, as I will be as well, because it's fascinating, and really grateful to be connected with you in this way. Thank you so much for your time and all of your...
Thank you. My honor and my privilege. I really appreciate your invitation. And thank you for having me in your beautiful program.
Of course.
Thank you for the work you do.
Thank you. My pleasure. All right, guys, this was another episode of Transforming Trauma to Triumph. Thank you so much for watching, and we will catch you on the next one. Bye.